Runaway Pond by Nancy Price Graff and read to you today by Gammy. Long ago, when the forests were thick and still full of moose and bear, a village grew up in a faraway wilderness. Life in the village revolved around a pond. Its name was Long Pond because it was indeed long and narrow and bent in the middle, like a crooked finger. It was also deep and cold all year round. But what made the villagers think they had a pond like no other was the water, which was clear and fine on a summer's day. Cows came down to the water's edge to drink and were astonished to find cows looking back at them with their same sweet brown eyes and long eyelashes. Children on the banks laughed when they threw their fishing hooks into the water and watched their lines zig and zag into the depths. They laughed harder still when the children reflected in the pond, also called slippery silverfish striped with rainbows. Ducks with speckled brown breasts gabbled in the pond, unaware that their reflections swam underneath them upside down, doing everything that they did. In spring and summer, the village women hung their laundry beside the pond, and the reflections of their sheets and clothes in the water created such a great billowing brightness that it made everyone think that it must be the cleanest village that there ever was. In autumn, the pond threw back the colors of the hills. The red, orange, and yellows of the surrounding trees made the pond look like it was on fire. In winter, the pond captured the somber days in its ice, with iron gray over the heads and iron gray under their feet. The villagers sometimes thought that they had fallen down in a hole. Every 4th of July, the village celebrated the nation's birth with a big party down by the pond. Children bobbed for apples. Men brought their oxen to see which one pulled the heaviest load. Women hung up the quilts that they had worked on all winter long for everyone to admire. Someone played the fiddle and all the villagers stepped lively. Each year, boys and men gathered on the banks of the pond for a big foot race round it. Every year, Spencer Chamberlain won. He was big and strong and had long legs that carried him swiftly through the grasses and woods that surrounded it. The villagers didn't mind that he won every year. They would yell, "Run, Chamberlain, run!" One year, in late summer, rain began to fall. But this was no ordinary rain. Rain fell day after day without end. The pond started to rise. First it swallowed the grasses at the water's edge, then it swallowed the young trees that had taken root in the moist soil behind the grasses. When it flooded the village dock, the villagers began to worry. The small stream where the pond emptied over a dam and gave water to people living below began to swell and snarl like a wild animal caught in a trap. Soon part of the dam gave way. The villagers grew frightened for their neighbors living downstream. Watching more and more of the dam wash away, one of the villagers cried out, "We must warn them." But how could anyone tell the neighbors they needed to escape to higher ground? Could anything move as fast as the water racing down the hill? Suddenly someone yelled, "Call Chamberlain. He can save our neighbors." Another villager took up the cry, "Run, Chamberlain, run." Soon the whole village was shouting, "Run, Chamberlain, run." Chamberlain never ran so fast in his life. The stream snapped and snarled at his heels like an angry dog. Branches tore at his shirt and pants, but he kept running. A wall of water as tall as a house built up behind him, tearing up trees and fell with a deafening roar. For mile after mile, his long legs kept leaping ahead of the boiling cascade. All along the way, he yelled, "Get to high ground! The pond is running away!" The stream roared on, out to a river that would eventually carry the pond water out to sea. Chamberlain could rest at last. He fell to the ground. For a long time, he gulped air as his heart pounded as if it was thunder in his chest. Spencer Chamberlain saved the villagers' lives, but the pond had run away for good. All that was left was a big puddle. Cows no longer went down to the banks because they sank to their knees in the mud and couldn't get out. Mothers and fathers told their children to stay away from the puddle because they could only get into mischief. The ducks left and took their reflections with them. Chamberlain lived in the village for the rest of his long life. The villagers called him a hero for saving the lives of his neighbors. He stayed tall and strong, even into old age, and strode about on his long legs, but he never ran another race again. He said he had run the greatest race of his life and had nothing left to prove. By the next spring, a green marsh full of life began to rise where the gleaming silvery pond had once been. The marsh was long and narrow and bent in the middle like a crooked finger. Every day of the year, children explored it and found something new to delight in. In the summer, children picked bouquets of marsh marigolds as brilliant as bars of gold. Beavers collected nearby branches and built up domes as tall as the children themselves. Red-winged blackbirds swayed atop cattails and splintered the hot days with their piercing cries. In autumn, small berries turned red as rubies and lit up the marsh like 1,000 little lights. Flocks of geese heading south for the winter settled in the marsh to rest overnight and set up such a racket that villagers had to hold their hands over their ears to find some peace. In winter, ferns and wild grasses frozen in place looked like stained glass windows to the children who pressed their faces to the ice. The pond was gone, but it had left something beautiful behind, and new generations of children found wonder in the marsh that grew up in its place. The end. Take a second and read about the true story of Runaway Pond. We have so much more to learn. Be blessed.